Hello everyone. Right then, I am going to get some music to go with this running screen. I really am. Possibly I'll record it myself on the trombone. Just record me playing something on the trombone. It might be good music, it might be bad music, but it'll be music, so you know that I am live, and I'm here, even if this is the running screen, and even if I am currently being beaten up by a poodle. And I am being beaten up by a poodle because someone has realised it is Thursday, it is live time, and therefore... What is it? What does this noble creature in front of me desire? A biscuit, yeah. Look, you and I both know what you need. Radar 457 454. We're gonna hand this on the producer at you when I start talking. Hidden Alex attack. So, in good news, the computer parts are mostly here, barring the motherboard, which arrives tomorrow. So the new computer we built tomorrow. And hopefully, therefore, this is the last live that we have on the laptop. And, yeah. That's going to be a good thing. The laptop is working a bit better because it has now increased its RAM from 8 gigabytes to a full, an absolutely amazing 16. And that's gone from 4 gigabytes working and 3.78 gigabytes sort of working to a solid 16 gigabytes working of RAM, thanks to Leslie, who sent that to me. So thank you very much. I'm not sure if we can plug extra RAM into you to make you work any better. Could we? No. You just think you just work on bits and bytes of biscuits. Okay. And yes, tonight we are doing an Admiral who I guarantee you have never heard of. Honestly, I guarantee no one has ever heard of this. If you have heard of Joshua Rowley, put it in the chat now. Because I am 100% certain, unless you've Googled him, since you saw me use him as a title, you will not have heard of him at all. Hello. Hello. Calm down. I know you're getting better. You're acting better too, but no. Kingdom of Finland, we haven't started yet, so I'll answer this question, but normally I'd say it as a Brew Ships question. Yeah, nuclear-powered ocean liner would be cool. Right until you assess the terrorist issues and the docking issues of where it would have to go into, and the certification of ports, and a limited number of ports that will take a nuclear-powered vessel going in them, let alone a civilian nuclear-powered vessel. Yeah. Yes, the dog is very much being gone. Go to sleep. Stop trying to bully your papa for biscuits. He's not a staff officer in actual fact. He's a Vice-Admiral in the end of his career. But he is, how do I put this politely? Joshua Rowley is an active, an honourable, a victorious career, yet it's not an illustrious career. He wins naval battles. He is a doughty sub-commander and many others. But it is not a career which we will hear of. And if you want to understand how successful he is, let's consider this. His children are Sarah Rowley, Arabella Rowley, Sir William Rowley, the second baronet and a member of Parliament. He's made a baronet. And High Sheriff of Suffolk. Philadelphia Rowley, who marries Admiral Sir Charles Cotton. Admiral Bartholomew Samuel Rowley, who served as Commander-in-Chief of Jamaica Session, like Joshua had. Reverend Joshua Rowley. And what else have you got? Oh, you've got your toilet. You're allowed that. And Admiral Sir Charles Rowley. Simply put, he doesn't get a ship name for him. No. He doesn't get a ship name for him. He does, however, have a very fine family which comes from him. And he himself serves with distinction in many battles. We have gone for a long walk today, and you are being very overactive. Let's go put this away. Let's put this away. Why you play with this one, but not the other one? The other one doesn't squeak. This one does. Hence this one was hidden away. Behave. You have been absolutely excellently well behaved, doggy, all day. Behave. So, this is one of those officers who you will not hear about, but without whom the wooden wall wouldn't work. And when I tell you he is in battles, we're going to be going through the battles he was part of today. His commands include Rye, Ambuscade, Hampshire, Montague, Superb, Monarch, Suffolk, Conqueror, and of course Jamaica, as mentioned. He takes part in the Battle of Toulon, the Battle of Cartagena, the Battle of St. Cast, the Battle of Quiberon Bay, the expedition against Dominica, the Battle of Ushant, the Battle of Grenada, and the Battle of Martinique. He serves 1744 to 1783. He did well. He did very well. Leave. He was a very successful, very capable commanding officer. But he was also, more importantly, a very successful subordinate. And he really did serve. Whose shadow was he under? Well, this is the thing. He's under many shadows. His career, he will serve under Keppel, Hawke, Howe, and Rodney. Think about that. Think about all those names and how well they're known. And the thing is, whilst the Royal Navy might claim it names its ships for admirals, it names them for the famous admirals, let's be honest. It names them for the admirals which have a cachet, both at home and abroad. So, as well as this guy did, as capable as this guy did, as sensible as this guy was in command, yeah. Basically, Rowley is the guy who all the famous admirals want to call to want to be on their team. That's the thing about it which is interesting. Think about that. If Rodney has a choice, he wants Rowley there. If Keppel has a choice, he wants Rowley there. If Howe has a choice, he wants Rowley there. If Hawke has a choice, he wants Admiral Rowley there. If Byron, another admiral, quite not as famous as those guys, but still quite famous admiral in his own right, has a choice, he wants Rowley there. But Rowley is not known to history. Rowley is basically not your, and I usually use the example of the baseball team because that's more sort of the example. Because everyone sort of plays different, more similar rules in a baseball team. Cricket is a bit different. But imagine your Ansons, your Howes, your Rodneys are your star pitchers on your team. The ones who are going to be really good. And then you've got people like Nelson, Keppel, Collingwood, who are your star batsmen. Rowley is your good all-rounder. He's not going to get the spectacular soaring, send the ball off a million miles away, or the really fast, difficult pitch. But when you need him, he can pitch into either role. When you need him to, he can do whatever you need. And that's the advantage. And yeah, Vinland, bring up the questions about nuclear-powered merchant ships on bro ships on Sunday. I will spend a lot of time going into all that detail because, frankly, it's a fun topic to do. He's a finisher. He's a safe pair. He's a solid middle. He's a solid. If you have him in your pack, you will never be going, oh, I don't have a pitcher to fill this hole, or I don't have a batsman to fill this hole. You'll have him. He's a utility man. Exactly, Mehdi. He's the sort of person who you really want on your roster. Not going to make the crowd go wild being on your roster, but you as the coach, you as the guy, captain of the team, you want him there. Good boy. And that is his entire service, his entire career. Exactly. But the point is, and the point I've been trying to make in the year of leadership, is that leadership comes at many levels and in many forms. And we all are leaders in a way. We all choose to be leaders in the organisation we're in. He is rarely at the top. But he's often in a leadership role. He's often the highest position a lot of people can look to. And he has to put forward his view, explain his position. Sometimes it's adopted by senior officers, sometimes it isn't. And whatever the decision is made, he has to go out and sell it and deliver it. And he does this well. The interesting thing is, he only lives till he's 56. He literally lives 1734 to 1790. And if you want to realise how good he is, he achieves a captain, not just captain, but being posted as captain, so he's been posted. His command's been accepted, it's a captain in a four-ringer ship, so he's been posted. When he gets a 6 for 8 HMS Rye in 1753. In simple terms, he joined in 1734. Well, no, he's born in 1734. He joins the Navy in... There is a debate as exactly when, but we're fairly certain he joins in 1744 at some point. So he's 10 years old when he joins the Navy. He's 19 years old when he's made a captain. A full captain. He is 19 years old when he becomes a captain. Now, admittedly, he has an advantage in this. He does have an advantage in all this because of who his father was. He was the fourth son of Admiral Sir William Rowley, who was a pretty good admiral in his own right. And that's actually the first battle, I'm fairly sure I have in a list here, of battles he took part in. Yes. Because his first battle he took part in is the Battle of Toulon, in the War of Austrian Succession. And we know he's there because at this battle, he's on his father's flagship, HMS Stirling Castle. "10 years old. The interesting thing about the Battle of Toulon is that technically it's a bit of a, how do I put this, a whole debate as to what happens in terms of the roles and what actually happens. Thomas Matthews is the guy supposed to be in charge, but Rowley's father, William Rowley, actually seems to take charge because Matthews seems to basically lose control of the operation and lose control of it, and afterwards He then withdraws. Matthew orders a withdrawal, and so afterwards, Matthews and a few of his captains are actually court-martialed and kicked out of the battle, kicked out of the Royal Navy. I mean, and Rowley is made commander-in-chief of the Mediterranean Fleet and serves there. And this is Joshua's father, William Rowley, serves as commander-in-chief of the Mediterranean Fleet from 1744 to 1748. So from the ages of 10 to 14, Rowley is a midshipman aboard his father's flagship. Well, when I say he's a midshipman till 1747, when he is promoted to lieutenant after taking his exams. And, you know, then he gets transferred to other ships. He seems to go and serve on HMS Penzance, frigate. He goes to serve on all sorts of ships outside of his father's control. Yeah, 10 years old, he's in the Battle of Toulon. The Battle of Toulon, by the way, is an incredibly muddy affair, which someday I will probably do an entire video about, but it's in February, and it's... Well, there's a whole debate as to whether it's 21st or 22nd of February, which it would be under the new style, but the 11th to 12th of February under the old style. And it's... The British bring 32 ships of the line, 2 frigates, 2 fireships, and a hospital ship to the battle. And the French bring 28 ships of the line, 4 frigates, and 4 fireships to the battle. And the British lose a fireship, and the French lose a ship of the line. But because of the way Matthews handles it, life is an issue. And that's why Matthews is replaced with Rowley. And I should point out that Rowley, he doesn't have an inactive Mediterranean command. His son will have learnt quite a lot at that point. Really will have learnt a lot at the point. But it's also no surprise to me that his son getting to be a full captain and a posted captain at 19 is somehow there is some help from his father. But I would also argue that we are talking about the same man who seems to have reportedly kicked at least one of his sons out of the Navy for not being good at his job, although that's a disputed thing about his father, and there's a whole thing of we're not quite sure quite how many children he had, and there's some discussion over that, but that's the joy of a bit of history, and he's honestly someone working on it. I mean, his grandson and great-grandsons go on to become very senior. He had 4 sons and 1 daughter, we're fairly certain, but he does seem to be William Rowley does not seem to be the type to promote you just because you're related to him. Let me put it in Doe's phrase. He seems the type to, are you actually good at your job? Are you going to make me look good if you get promoted? If you're not, then you're not getting promoted. Night at the time, in nicest way, there were a lot a lot younger than 10 years old serving on Royal Navy ships. It's a different time. It's the 18th century. It's the way it was. You can't go back and change it, basically. They had 10-year-olds serving positions. If you consider your average life expectancy at that point was a lot less than it is now. Rowley himself will die when he's 56 years old. And he was considered to have had a good life. But you have to be aware, when the old men and a Vice-Admiral by that point is 56 years old, and he's been in service had served 44 odd years. Well, no. 39 years of service? Joining up at 10 makes sense. And the powder monkeys could be 6, 7 years old. If they even knew their ages. As long as they were tall enough and could hold the powder, they could join up. And if you're an orphan or if you're a child on the streets, that can be a very good deal compared to what else you could suffer. Because you have to remember, whilst it's a harsh life at sea, there are rules and regulations to protect you. And there's the sailor's court which will protect you. To an extent. Yes, there are always going to be people who are, let's say, problematic. Bullies, etc. And they can get away with a level of bullying, probably. Especially if they're protected by command. In this time period. But there is also the very real realization you're on a ship which has where there's a captain who has absolute power of life or death if they need to in rule enforcement. They are the master under God. And there's also the fact that quite a few seamen don't like the idea of you beating up little kids. And finally, you have to remember the powder monkeys report to the gunner. So they're the gunners. And the gunner is usually, in this period, quite often someone who's been promoted from the ranks. A warrant officer. Often. Of some kind. Which means their methodologies of justice, if you hurt the people under their care, will be very different. Very, very different than we might consider today. So, yes, whilst it's not exactly the nicest place in the world to find yourself on a ship in the middle of battle, compared to living on the streets of London or various other things, yeah, it's probably better. And if you're a trainee, if you're a charter officer, again, we've talked about this before, in the age of sail, going to sea at 10, midshipman, perfectly normal. Oh yeah, they'd be learning a trade, they'd be taught it. And, as said, you have a choice. A society which is brutal but has rules and people don't cross them. Or rather, if there's very real consequences if you do cross them. And remember, on a ship, there's no secrets. On a ship, even today, there are no secrets. It's far too small. It's far too small a space, far too small a body of people. You will never have a secret. So if you're trying to do something you shouldn't be, it will be spotted and found out very quickly. And something will happen. Officers, chiefs, sailors go overboard in storms or on night watch. They just disappear. There are some memoirs from people who are powder monkeys. So, yeah. And almost that's nicer than what happens to you if your captain finds you. There was one case, if I remember correctly, from someone who was... It was abusing the powder monkeys, abusing their position vis-a-vis the powder monkeys. Not sure which article of war it was, but I remember reading it, and it was possibly somewhere buried in this book, because this book is massive. Yeah. It came up to the captain, because the midshipman spotted it. One of the midshipmen happened to be the captain's nephew. Reported it to the captain. Executive officer looked into it. The gentleman, I think, got something like 2,500 lashes. And then was put into a brig when they got back to port. It's a brutal time. And let's be honest, if you live through 2,500 lashes, your back is going to be crisscrossed to anything. Yeah. They can, remember what they can do with the lashes is they can keep it going, but they can also pause it under medical advice at any point. But it's only paused. If you're found to have repeated the crime, it's continued the punishment. And again, it can be paused under advice of the doctor, or under advice of, or under the ruling of the captain. But yeah, they can order a lot. Yeah. There were captains in the Age of Sail who were, remember, there were captains of Age of Sail who were very very proud of the fact that they had never had to execute anyone. And often, it's very rare they do, actually. Because the crew do understand that if they cross the line enough that the captain's getting involved, and it's serious punishment, then the captain's going to make an example of them so they don't have to do it again. 2,500 lashes is nicer than keel hauling. Because 2,500 lashes, they can pause. Keel hauling, hanging, all these were options. All these were options. The odds are the guy didn't take all 2.5. And flogging around the fleet is also not good. Flogging around the fleet was one where they put you in a rowboat. They rowed you from ship to ship, and they flogged you in front of the ship each ship as an example. So every ship in the fleet got to see you being flogged for what you'd done. Your crime would be read out, and it would be done. And in the nicest way, that could be brutal. And could go on for a very long time. But one of the interesting things about these punishments is they are quite rare. I know there are lots of fiction books which include them, but actually in naval terms they are quite rare. Because it's kind of the statistic of, they know the captains can do it, they know they will do it if they need to, so it doesn't happen. It's the classic thing of, hang on, if I'm going to probably get caught in this scenario on this ship. And if I get caught, the punishment is going to be checks Articles of War. That's not going to be good. No, I'm not doing that. No. I like my skin where it is. Same penguins. I don't know how old I was before I realized that barnacles were a feature of the keel hauling. Yes. They are a feature. And the fact that you might clean off some of the barnacles for the captain and make his ship go faster is a benefit, not a detraction. And one of the things you also have to remember is the ships aren't really set up to have people in the brig or in jail for long periods of time. If you have crew on board who you're feeding, you need them to be active members of your crew participating in the jobs. This is another thing about this 10-year-old. Just because he's 10 and with his dad doesn't mean he's not doing his job, because, trust me, he will be. He'll be doing his job. Dave Harrison, did they make keel hauling safer after copper? No, because despite copper bottoming improving, removing the barnacle obstacle, it actually made it so the vessel was quicker, which could actually mean, it's going to sound strange, it tended to mean that you would probably be further under by the time you were, because the barnacle, if you're lucky, knocks you out, and you die quickly. Most people, after copper bottoming, if they are keel hauled, will probably because we haven't done much study in this, but a theory that has been put in has them basically drowning by about halfway along the vessel. Some people did survive keel hauling, apparently. Not that many, but some did. Keel hauling, Seneca Nero, keel hauling did not die out before copper bottoming. It just was less common. Anyway, with that being said, the Battle of Cartagena. Now, this is the first battle where we have him in command of his own ship. And he's in command of HMS Montague. Montague is the 60-gun 448 ship of the line. Excellent, a large number of things. That was the other option. The captain could deliver them over a week. There are many options for a captain with the lashings. But still, 2,500 lashings. I would not want to have been that guy's back. Oh no. General Moon, keel hauling is length to length. There are some people putting athwart ships, right? And so, depends what navy you're talking about. The Royal Navy was traditionally lengthwise when the ship was under power, and the own current of the water movement over across the hull will pull you along. When the ship was stationary, it was a athwart ship. Mary, I read that the cannon nine tails will be softened and could be delivered less punishment damage if the punishment was deemed unjust. Is that true? There are certainly options to the people wielding the cat and nine tails, etc., and wielding the various floggers, but again, how do I put this? The bosun's mates, starters. Remember, if they interfere in these things too much, they could get caught themselves and they could be up for punishment themselves. It's theoretical options, but it's rare they do it, because, honestly, as said, if a punishment was unjust, there's got to be a reason it was unjust. And if something's got bad enough to the point to which the captain is going to be flogging you, then you've done something quite bad. To warrant the cat and nine tails coming out, to warrant more than lashes with what was called sometimes a starter, and a few other things like that, you have to have done something pretty darn bad. You have to have done something pretty darn bad to warrant it. Now, the Battle of Cartagena, the officer in charge is a guy called Henry Osborne. Now, Osborne at this point is in charge of 4 ships a line. And again, he's another admiral you'll never hear. You'll never hear about much, because frankly, he goes on to become a full admiral and governor of Newfoundland, and he does all sorts of things, but again, he's not one of the big famous battles. And he ends up fighting the French. He has 4 ships in line, the French have 3. One of his ships in line is the Montague. And this is part of the 7 Years' War. Now, the French were under command of Michel and Duquesne de Manville. And, yeah. Basically, the French spot the larger British force. By larger by one ship of the line, so not exactly massive. Duquesne orders his ships to scatter. This is not a sensible position to do. It really isn't. Because whilst he is sailing into Toulon, where he has other ships which could reinforce him, the fact is he's got 4 ships versus 3. If he keeps together as a solid group, he has a chance of getting them past. That is not much of an advantage. But by ordering them to scatter, he's now made them 3 individual ships against 4. And you can guess what happens, because there are 2 French ships of the line captured. So everyone want to guess what happens? 4 ships versus 3, and 3 decide to scatter? So there was a sort of a 33% advantage. Now, pretty much what you have is you have the Orphée, the Flamboyant, which is well, the Orphée is caught overpowered by 3 ships. The Oriflamme was run aground to save it, and the Flamboyant, which was Duquesne's flagship, was pursued and caught by Monmouth. Now, here's the interesting thing. At this point, we're talking about 1758. 1758. So, Joshua Rowley, by this point, is 24 years old. He's been a full captain for 5 years. At the Battle of Cartagena, because Osborne charges off to take the Flamboyant, Duquesne's ship, guess who takes the lead of capturing the other vessel? It is the Montague. And it's also the Montague which drives Oriflamme ashore. So, basically, whilst Osborne is off completing the task, one of the ships is captured with PALs by Rowley, and then Rowley then takes a lead in making sure the other ship is driven ashore. So actually what they achieved was 3-1 odds in one battle, 2-1 odds in another battle, which ended up driving ashore, and 1-on-1 odds when... how do I put this politely? Let's see, the Flamboyant was an 80-gun ship of the line. The Monmouth was not. In fact, she seems to have been pretty darn powerful, judging by her list. Her lists of detail, her stats. I'm just making sure I have the exact stats, because I have multiple lists of her. Because she was rebuilt so often in her career. She was a 70-gun third-rate ship of the line at this point. Theoretically. Yeah. Originally built and this is the fun thing, is the Monmouth which fights in this battle was originally launched in 1667, apparently. Was given a rebuild in... was built as a 66-gun third-rate ship of the line. Was rebuilt in 1700. So, launched in 1667. Rebuilt in 1700. Rebuilt again in 1718. And rebuilt again in 1742. Possibly rebuilt in 1680 something as well. So, we can all ask ourselves whether the Monmouth in this battle is the Monmouth which was launched in 1667, or was the ship of Theseus. All we know is that by 1742, and 1758 is 16 years after that, she is theoretically... she will last in service till 1767. She's theoretically on her way to her 100th birthday. She's theoretically 91 years old at this point. And she has been through... 3 great rebuilds. 1 possible rebuild. Yeah. So, yes. And one of the interesting things to note is in the painting of the Monmouth capturing the Foudroint, if you go and look it up, the ship closest in the background is the Montague. And that was as the Admiral specified it, because the Admiral wished it to show his greatest support. Think about that. Rowley did such a good job in his ship as a captain that the Admiral specified he be in his painting. It's an interesting battle, the Battle of Cartagena in 1758. Okay, and I swear, I don't normally do this and don't normally bring these sort of things up, but Reynolds just asked if they should get steak and cheese on their way home, and I'm honestly surprised that's a question. If you're a vegetarian, you do you. But if you're not a vegetarian and you have the option of a steak and cheese dinner, why wouldn't you? That's just... no. So everyone please at Runon and tell them to get themselves steak and cheese for dinner. In fact, that's even a question. It's almost disturbing. So next we're up to Admiral Richard Howe. This is the first great admiral that he serves under. And Howe really is a great admiral, okay? There are some admirals we're going to be talking about today where they are known to be great, but they have definite failings. Howe, for me, has always been one of those admirals who, for all his issues, because he is human, is actually one of the ones who I have a lot of respect for. You know, there is a reason Howe in 1797 is called in to pacify the Spithead mutineers, is the phrase. He is trusted by the Navy. He literally restores the order at the Spithead mutiny, and this is one of the great mutinies of 1797, by quite literally being rowed around the fleet for 12 hours and speaking to the men. Speaking to the sailors. He is one of those men who at his time is universally trusted as being an honest broker. He is a rare person in this period in that he is respected by all sides of the political aisle. That is something amazing. And yeah, he is... Well, he commanded some pretty cool battles, let's be honest. His battles include... Well, the glorious 1st of June. It's usually the one we tend to focus on. But he takes part in various operations in the American War of Independence. He does all sorts of things in the 7 Years' War. And we're going to be talking about one of his battles very shortly. He is respected, and he's of course, carries out the relief of Gibraltar in 1782. And he does this in the face of a combined Franco-Spanish force of 46 ships of the line, when he only has 33. And the thing is, he then fights what's classified often as the indecisive Battle of Cape Spartel, where he has 34 ships of the line which have been, how do I put it this way, beaten up, tossed, turned, barely put together. And this is, of course, in 1782. Against 34 ships of the line under Luis de Corva, who was a Spanish Navy officer. Yes, there is a Franco-Spanish fleet, and it's under command of a Spanish officer. And it's considered inconclusive. But honestly, that's one of the great times when the Royal Navy turns up to the battle, and their ships are honestly less prepared than the Franco-Spanish fleet. Less prepared. And I'm reckoning during that battle, he would really have liked to have had one Captain Joshua Rowley with him. He really would have liked it. Because he found him quite a useful man. And again, he's another one he points to in a leadership role. The Battle of St. Cast. Now, this is one of those interesting battles where people go, what the frigate? I've never heard of this before. Now, this is when the British try and land an expeditionary force on the French coast. And it's technically a French victory. But the naval forces do very, very well. Very well. The naval forces are under the command of Anson and Howe. Think about that. This is a fleet under the command of Anson and Howe. Two of Britain's best admirals ever. They're also two of the lesser-known great admirals of the Royal Navy, but they do deserve to be known a bit more better than they are. At this point, Howe is a Commodore, Anson, of course, is an Admiral. And Anson has the main fleet off with 22 ships of the line and 9 frigates. That's the main fleet squadron to provide a naval protection. Howe's fleet is 1 ship of the line of 64 guns, which is his own flagship. 4 of 50-ish guns, 10 frigates, 5 sloops, 2 fireships, some bomb ketches, 6,000 sailors, 6,000 marines, 100 transports, 20 tenders, 10 storeships, 10 cutters, and 5,000 merchant sailors aboard them. And they also carried 4 infantry brigades as well, and a train of 60 cannon with 400 artillerymen, and some light dragoons, for a total of 10,000 soldiers as well. In the nicest way, these are not even thousands of miles. The Battle of Saint Cassen is France. They're not even thousands of miles really from home. More like hundreds. It's just there's no satellite communications. One of the things you have to remember today, that we have to remind ourselves today, is that the reason you have the problem of what I would say called squad commander in the sky. I still use the Vietnam phrase, where generals and even politicians try to command relatively down to quite small units and tell them to do this, is because they have satellite links, they have all the communications, they have the information, so they think they can. They think it's like a computer game. It's not. There's a very big difference between this and a computer game. I know, I love playing those big strategic games where I can sit over forces and I can tell them what to do. It's great fun. But humans are not like that. And the real world is not like that. There are several things in those game dynamics which make it work. For starters, they're in a game. Anyway, in this battle, well, he has fun. Because technically, Rowley was supposed to be with Anson. But it was felt that Hal needed a senior officer to assist him. So Rowley, who has been doing all the other stuff he's been doing, is off helping him. And he is actually wounded and left on the beach at one point, because he is helping getting the personnel ashore and getting them off. He's put in charge of beach operations. And he, along with 3 other captains, Mapleston, Paston, and Elphinstone, was taken prisoner on the beach. They had literally been what we would call today the beach team, organising the Marines, organising the troops ashore, organising loads and offloads, and yes, the Dragoons had brought their horses. That's what they've been doing ashore. And you start to see there's a pattern coming of what Rowley's being used for. Where you need someone who's reliable, who can organise things, who is going to lead from the front when necessary, Rowley is quite a useful force. Now, the thing is, he gets exchanged. He does get exchanged. And when he gets exchanged back, he comes back in October 17, after October 17, before October 1759. So he's exchanged within a few months. He gets a few months living in France. And please note, I should have pointed out when I was talking about Rowley's family and his children, he gets married in 1759, so the year he comes back, to Sarah Burton, who's the daughter of the Governor of the Bank of England, Bartholomew Burton. And as said, they managed to have, between them, 7 children. 3 daughters and 4 sons. Very, very active family. Exchange was easier, the French needed them more, but to be honest, again, it's rather useful to the Royal Navy they weren't killed, because those are all quite good captains, which the Royal Navy would prefer to have available. But now he goes off to be with Hawke. And yeah. Hawke is an interesting admiral. There's a reason I call him the Decider. And I would say very much that Rowley served with the better admirals he would serve under first. You all know my views on Keppel. I've not made any secret of them. Rodney I've also given quite a thorough discussion to. But Hawke is... I've called him the Decider. I could also have called him the Gambler. But the reason I call him the Decider is he seems to take very much calculated risks. He decides on it. And he achieves it. Hawke is one of those officers. He had taken part in the Battle of Toulon in 1744. And he'd actually met Joshua then. He knew of William. He'd served under William, but he'd met Joshua and William then. So he'd served under Joshua's father at the Battle of Toulon. And again, it's unsurprising that he goes, I'd rather like to have this guy. Naughty ex-Mariner. But, yeah, he and his wife were active, but I think from what I understand, I have this feeling his wife might have been one of the wives who decided that she was going to spend time at sea with her husband. I wouldn't be surprised if she was regularly, spending time on ship. As I've talked about before, captains' wives, senior officers' wives, quite often ended up on ships because that was the only place where they find their husband, and they would be an informal staff. And while she was the daughter of the governor of Bank of England, she probably would understand what a naval officer's wife tended to do. And so it's it's a balancing act, let's say this. Lions, I'll get to that when I get to the Seamus book plug. So, Hawke. What can I say about Hawke? His first command we know of was called HMS Wolf. And that sums him up in so many ways. He was absolutely ravenous to take down the enemy. He was the Sea Wolf of Britain. And he was a decider of many battles. Any battle he takes part in, he decides. At the Battle of Toulon, he captured the only prize of the battle. At the Battle of Toulon, I talked about the 1744 Battle of Toulon. He was the ship that captured the Battle of Toulon. He was the only ship that captured it. And he captured 6 ships of a French squadron in the Second Battle of Cape Finisterre in 1747. And in the 7 Years' War, he is the guy who goes to replace John Byng as commander in the Mediterranean, and takes part in the siege of Fort St. Philip, and does also things of Rochefort, and then of course does Quiberon Bay, and the blockade of Brest, and the capture of Belle Isle, and all sorts of things. He goes on to become a First Lord of the Admiralty, and does quite a good job there as well. And Hawke is a known collector of good officers, okay? Good example, he collects James Cook. He collects multiple officers. If you are good, he will collect you in his entourage. He has no qualms about wanting one thing, and that is the success of the Navy, preferably with him in charge of the fleet at its head. And to do that, he believes he needs good officers. This is the interesting thing about the patronage system. We are often used to viewing the idea of the patronage system as being a bad thing because it's jobs for the boys. And that is true. If the patronage system is used like that, that is a bad thing. But in this period, you used to have real consequences for the patron if those they patronized were not up to the job. If you sponsored that person and they failed, it made you look bad. So that made you be very judicious about who you patronized, who you looked after, who you promoted. And they'd be careful. So, yeah. If you're being picked up by Hawke, you're good. If you're being picked up by Hawke, you are very, very good. Now, interesting thing, at Battle of Quiberon Bay, they're of course under Hawke, and Joshua Rowley is back in charge of Montague, his steady steed. He's got his 60-gun ship back under his charge. He is happy. Please note, there is a curious phrase used in one of the works to describe Joshua's ships when they are mentioned, when the Montague's mentioned, is that it was apparently a 60-gun ship. Apparently a 60-gun ship. Now, that intrigued me when I read it. Intrigued me indeed it did. Because it's basically, it says to be pierced for 60 guns. Supposed to be pierced for 60 guns. But it may have been that we are actually dealing with a 64-gun ship. Because there seems to be a discussion of exactly how many 24-pounders he's managed to get aboard the ship. Because it's supposed to be 26 12-pounders and 24 24-pounders. And 8 6-pounders, and 10 6-pounders on the top, on a quarterdeck and forecastle. So that, makes up the 60 guns. But there's a possibility, he has a couple of extra 6-pounders sitting up there. And there's a possibility he's managed to get some more 24-pounders, although he's not supposed to. There's all sorts of discussions about his ships, and Montague does seem to be a vessel he takes quite a lot of love for. He really does have a lot of affection for her. And, he even they capture a privateer, Marquis de Montgay, in 1759. And they also captured the French Hardy Merchant of Dunkirk, and he's using her to go around and capture ships. So he certainly is building up quite a decent amount of money still. He did that while a frigate captain, but he's also doing that in this battle and other ones. Now, in Quiberon Bay, well, as we all know, this is the battle where the Royal Navy decide that you can ride waves over rock formations, pulling theoretically versions of a handbrake turn, and actually pull in front of your enemy fleet as they're trying to get into a bay to get away from you. Quiberon Bay, again, I've done a video about it. There is a whole book about it somewhere around here, which I have shown off many times. It is well worth a read. And it is one of those battles that the fact that there hasn't been an absolutely brilliant movie made about it is a absolute damning indictment of the British film industry. Because Quiberon Bay is one of those battles which, frankly, is full of cinematic greatness. I mean, literally, ships riding waves over rock formations. And the British did lose 2 ships doing it. The French lost 6 on the shoals. It is an absolute nightmare of a battle. But it's something you only do with captains you trust. And the thing is, when you start looking down the list of captains that the Royal Navy has at Quiberon Bay, you start listing names. You have, of course, Hawke's flagship itself is commanded by a guy called John Campbell, who goes on to become a Vice-Admiral. You have Sir Charles Hardy as his second-in-command. His flagship's Thomas Evans, the captain. Tom Evans. And you start going through the list, and you've got Samuel Graves, Matthew Buckle, James Young, John Bentley, William Fortescue, Augustus Keppel, Viscount Howe. Still Commodore at this point. Henry Speke, George Edcombe, Sir Thomas Stanhope, Peter Dennis, James Gambier. Of course, goes on to become a Vice-Admiral. Washington Shirley, who goes on to become a Vice-Admiral. William Salt Warren, Lucius O'Brien, John Storr, Rowley, of course, we mentioned, in charge of Montague, Thomas Shirley in the Kingston, Joseph Mavelston in charge of the Intrepid. Robert Duff, Robert Digby, James Maplesden, Patrick Baird, Marietta Buffnott, Francis Samuel Drake, John Lockhart, Thomas Harrison, Alexander Hood, John Strachan, Gamil Nightingale, Francis Durlston, and Dudley Diggs. These are ships commanded by officers who go on to become greatness. You know, these are the names. The names of the list of officers at the Battle of Quiberon Bay. You then look down their history and you look at the future battles the Royal Navy fights in the latter half of the 18th century, and those officers are the officers making those battles. And you start to understand these officers were good captains picked for this force by Hawke, and then they saw, hang on, when you do something daring, when you do something great, and you've got good solid captains behind you who can pull it off, you can achieve glory. Prize money is a pathway to abilities some would consider unnatural. Yeah, fun, please. Tokyo drifting ship. Look, we've already. I think I did it last year. I talked about a 64 in the key ship series last year, talking about the 64 gunships of the line. I talked about the one which literally did do a handbrake turn in a Swedish fjord or a Norwegian fjord. I'm not sure what it was, inside a fjord. Chasing during one of the Northern Wars when the British were fighting, I think it was Norway, Denmark. They were on the side of the Swedes, and yeah, one of the 64 gun does a handbrake turn in a fjord, literally going around the corner, so it would be presenting its guns to the frigate trying to hide in there away from it. Well, yeah. This is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a fleet of officers who are like this. And now we're at the shameless book plug. So we're also at the halfway point. And it's roughly an hour and 15. Goodness gracious me. I'm actually timing this correctly. Usually I time it roughly so the slides will take roughly 2.5 hours to go through. And then there's half an hour for questions at the end. It works out. Now, in answer to Lion's question earlier about the computer, everything's arrived. I did then see a reduction in price for the Ryzen 9900 instead of when I have, of course, ordered the 7. I got the 7900 delivered, but I decided I'm going to keep with the 7900 because It's a nice stable one. And whilst the price has gone down for the 9900, it's still more money. So frankly, it's not that great. It's not really worth it for me. But everything's pretty much arrived, barring the motherboard, which arrives tomorrow. So when I say everything has arrived, I'm going to do... Hopefully the room's not a mess. No, the room's not a mess. I didn't think it was, but you know, you're never quite sure. Things that have arrived include more of these lovely fans, which I always like having, and yes, I have ordered 4 more of these fans because, well, yeah. The case can take a lot of them. Power supply has arrived. I got promoted from I ordered an 850, they were out of 850s from Be Quiet, so they sent me 1000 watts, so I'm not too disappointed. And the big thing that's here. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Here's the case. Which is a nice case. It is. But I will do probably a live build tomorrow on Twitch or something. There you go. Because hopefully the motherboard arrives at a sensible point tomorrow. Nelson did a handbrake. Nelson did all sorts of things. And was cruel, yes. Anyway, while I'm up, can. Oh. Will the case be up armored with book protection? Yeah, there are things being added to it. But also that's a very big, very solid case anyway. Hello, I'm here, thank you. Oh. Cool. No, it wasn't. And nice way, it's not, I don't put the books on it, a book fell on it. I've got no biscuits in my hands. I do not magically produce biscuits from my hands. They come from somewhere. You are very cute and adorable, and everyone loves you. They think you're beautiful. And they're also very glad you're putting on weight and you're getting better. Now, why do I do a shameless book plug other than just showing you all the computer stuff which I bought? Well, I do a shameless book plug because I like to say thank you to everyone for supporting the channel, and thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, doing all the things you do to help it grow. One of the things I'm really enjoying at the moment is that on both Twitch and YouTube, since I've been broadcasting on both, simulcasting, they have been growing. And they have been growing in terms of their audience, they've been growing in terms of their viewership. I know it's a bit weird doing this stuff on Twitch as well as YouTube. I know it is weird. And I realise probably Twitch is not quite sure what to do with me. But the thing is, I think it's kind of a missing audience because there's an immediacy with Twitch in terms of getting people out there. And you know, if you're doing a good job because of how the Twitch algorithm seems to make your stuff grow. I also think, and I want to emphasize this is not just about me, but this is about all content creators on YouTube and on Twitch. That subscribe button, the subscribe buttons. There are bells, there are things next to them which you need to look at, because if you want to see what the content creators you like have produced, you need to make sure you've told it to tell you. Because basically just subscribing these days means they are slightly better than anything else in your logarithm, but not that much more likely to get emphasized to you. And then you can do the personalised, at which point they pick what topics they think you'd like from that person and send you that. And that's, again, that's a worthwhile thing to do if that's what you want. And then there's the full, where you get told every time they go live. And then you have to make sure you've also got notifications enabled on your phone and your computer for it. Because if you don't have all those things done, it won't tell you. And you won't know. And that's sad, because for content creators, it's the platinum 5 minutes and the golden hour. The amount of views you get in the first hour, the amount of views you get in the first 5 minutes, they will have a real impact on how well your video does. And it's sometimes possible that a video will suddenly start snaking up afterwards, but that's rare. That's very, very rare. That means that event has suddenly become popular for some reason. And almost always that's not good for a good thing. Anyway, thank you everyone for your help and support, and thank you for supporting with the computer stuff. Oh, and another quick announcement. I will probably in June be going on a trip to Newcastle, at least for archive trip. I might be going further than Newcastle, but I might be going to Newcastle. I will probably be there, knowing me, on a Tuesday. I'll probably go, so if anyone is in the area in Newcastle on a Tuesday evening and fancies meeting up, I will arrange something, but just beat me in Discord and I'll set something up. I do have some heavy books. If I give you an example of one I've been reading a lot recently because of what's coming up in May. There you go. This is a really good book if you're interested in the Battle of Tsushima. This is basically what I would call, whilst it's not the be-all and end-all of research on Tsushima, it is a really, really good starter for it. But it is also not a light book. And it's £45. And I've had it for a while now, but it is a really good book. It's got lots of pictures, lots of quotes in it, lots of research from Russian archives as well as Japanese ones. It's worth a read if you're interested in Tsushima. But yeah. Yeah, it's fun. Anyway, with that being said, oh yeah, and so, please, if you're watching on Twitch or YouTube and you have a Twitch account and you haven't followed Runon, please do. They do excellent painting of models. I mean, literally, watching them paint models is pretty darn cool. And it's something I put on in the background sometimes while I'm working, just to have the model painting going on, because it's really inspiring. Is that £45 or £45? £45 as in the money. But possibly £4.50 in terms of weight. So, his next big operation he takes part in after the Battle of Quiberon Bay is the invasion of Dominica. And, yeah, this is fun times. This is fun times. This is, how do I put this politely? This is one of those operations where, frankly, the British win, but there is an argument as to whether or not the British actually deserve to win. There is an argument as to whether the British deserve to win. Now, why am I saying there's an argument if the British deserve to win? Well, they basically turn up to this island, which is, Dominica. It's a nice place to have. And they want to conquer Dominica, St. Lucia, and Martinique. They want to take them from the French. And here's the thing. The force that turns up, and I've got this picture here. This is the British attack on Razoo. The British turn up with 4 ships of the line and 2 frigates. And possibly some store ships and supply ships. They also take a few thousand soldiery with them. And those soldiers come from Britain, they also come from America. And Lord Rowley is in charge, but Sir James Douglas is basically the senior naval officer. Lord Rowley is a capable army officer. A capable army officer. And pretty much when they arrive, the initial force that arrives off Dominica was 300 men from the Guadeloupe garrison, 400 Highlanders, plus the 22nd Regiment of Foot and a 94th Vaughan's Regiment of Foot. Were all there. The 4 ships of the line were the Montague, the Sutherland, the Belux, and the Dublin, which was Douglas's flagship. They basically arrive on June the 6th. They summon a surrender. The French man their batteries. They have 4 lines of entrenchment. And so, with the redoubtable Captain Rowley being put in charge of the beaching operation, the troops land. And they storm the entrenchments immediately. The French hadn't been expecting this. The French commander and his second in command were both taken prisoners, and resistance ceased very quickly. Unlike the Guadeloupe and Martinique, in 1763, when they had the Treaty of Paris, Dominica is not returned to France. And in fact, whilst France managed to retake it during the American War of Independence, it returned to British control in 1783 and would remain in British control until independence was in 1978. And these pictures, they are all drawn by Archibald Campbell of the Royal Engineers. Which is why they are kind of interesting, because once you realise that the official war fleet is 4 ships of the line and 2 frigates, you realise there are multiple transports here being pictured. And that does make things interesting. At certain points, people tried to suggest that they might have been French ships. There is a reason we know there were no French ships in this battle. They weren't captured. That's it. They weren't captured. That tells us that, well, things, they weren't there. They didn't get a chance to run away. They really didn't. Yeah, most of the cannon aboard HMS Victory today are fiberglass. Most of them are fiberglass. And That's normal. It's a nice way to try and preserve the ship. Also, it's also a good way to preserve the cannon. It might sound strange that way, but we can take... The cannon are far more likely to rust in bad weather conditions and be damaged in weather conditions than the ship is. So the cannon which survive, the preserved cannon, are... How do I put this? Are stored elsewhere. Where they could do. I think they've got most of the cannon off now. With the recent work, I think they have managed to get most of the cannon off. I'm not sure if there are any still remaining. I'd have to go and do a knock test on the cannon to be absolutely sure. Because I'm not sure I'd trust anyone telling me. But no. Again, Rowley did a good usual job. He's working with the army, he's doing the amphibious operation, he's getting them ashore. And again, what's his leadership style? Well, we know from the remarks of various others involved, he was considered respected by Douglas, and he was very helpful by Douglas. And the thing is, again, it's not unusual when you have someone like going off who's a commodore, i.e. a captain who's been given rank, to send another senior captain with them to basically give them reinforcement and strength. And you have to think about this. In 1761, he has been a captain since 1753. So he's now been a captain for 8 years. Unless he's promoted in December 1753, so 7 years are the closest to, but you know, we'll technically call it 8 years. And he's got a fair amount of experience already under his belt. He's a reliable captain. He's a reliable subordinate commander of a ship and of a ship of the line, and he's still got the same ship. This is the thing is, he's still got the Montague. That's still his baby. And after this, well... Actually, I'll leave it on this one for this, but before we go to Keppel. After this battle, what does he do? Well, he's moved in November to HMS Superb. And then he takes command, he is in charge of pretty much the escort for the East India Company when it returned to England that year. By the way, the captains he commanded, and this is where he starts having an influence on his, he is promoted, he's in charge of, is an HMS Gosport, a frigate, under the command of Captain John Jervis, and HMS Danai, also under a quite good young captain. And he managed to bring all this trade, and successfully protects it from the French fleet of Commodore de Tannay. That he does such a good job getting the convoy back that when the East India Company sees how well he's did, they say they do this. Highly, how it was conduct approved by the East India Company and London West India merchants, that they presented him with a handsome silver elpagin and dish. Now, I think it's an epagine, but you'd actually have to tell me. I have no idea. I am going to copy into the text, and you can see how you pronounce it. Look it up if you want. He gets a silver one of these. He gets a silver epigen. Epigene. Epiperne? I have Epiperne? Possibly. Epiperne? Potentially. Anyway, he's given a nice silver one for his table centerpiece, which is always nice to have, I suppose. And he becomes the sponsor of John Jervis. Seneca Nero. He's probably a first name basis. Oh, in terms of the Montague, by that point, having been in charge of her for so long, he was probably not only first name basis with the sailing master. I think he probably took the sailing master with him to the Superb, if he'd had his way. He probably knew most of the crew. Think about it. He's been on that ship for, let's be honest, and considering the stuff he'd done in the Montague, he first gets command of the Montague in 1757, so he'd been in charge of her for 3 years. And in this period, that's a long time. Epiperne. Yeah. He'd have known the crew backwards and forwards. That crew would have been a very well-trained crew for him. And so, yeah, he's done well. He doesn't also take, in a nice way, I would like to add that there's also other officers he starts to take an interest in. He's reached the point in his career where he can really start to promote young officers. John Jervis is a good example, but there's also Erasmus Gower, who he appoints to an acting lieutenancy. And he is the one who eventually recommend Gower will serve on loan to the Portuguese Navy. And it's at this point, though, and this is going to sound terrible for him, he actually spends some time on the beach. He comes home in 1762. Turns over Superb. You'd expect at this point he'd get another ship. He'd get another fleet command. He's a useful officer. But he doesn't actually get anything till 1776. And partially that's because there isn't much going on in that time. Between 1762 and 1776, there's not a massive fleet needed for any operations, realistically. And he is given command of HMS Monarch in 1776, the 74-gun HMS Monarch. And in 1778, he takes some transports to Gibraltar. Which means he ends up serving under Augustus Keppel. Eventually. Now, Keppel this is one of his pictures when he was Commodore. When he was older, he was far less distinguished. And Keppel is a man who would rather have an argument and be right. As some quotes about him said, there's something high about his character. He believed in being right was more important than everything, which possibly explains why he never got married. Because he never found anyone who's prepared to put up with that. It's a sad thing sometimes looking at Keppel. Because he is in so many ways such a good guy. But in other ways, he is an utter ass. He really is. Little cousins didn't hear me say that. And he's one of those officers in terms of leadership who's both loved by his crew and loathed sometimes by his officers. He holds himself to an impossibly high standard, and he expects everyone else to meet it. Dan Freeman, on the beach equals more time with wife. Yes, it does. And to be fair, Rowley doesn't seem that bothered. One of the interesting things, he has enough contacts, he has enough push, he could push himself far more forward, but he seems to enjoy himself. You know, there are officers who go, well, that's 14 years ashore. But if you think about it, he'd first gone to sea when he was 10 years old. 10 years old. In 1744. So, he's had 18 years of naval service already. Getting a bit of a break at this point. It don't worry him too much. And it's not unusual in careers either. But the thing is, he's now going to pack it in. And one of the reasons why I think the Royal Navy is pulling people like him out of retirement is because they have got out of their positions. Is because the Royal Navy likes to husband their resources, yes, and they do like to keep some officers parked in this period so they can call them if they need them. Because there's always that theory of what happens if we lose a fleet and need to rapidly reconstitute a fleet. We need some good captains who are not doing anything, who are in the UK, who we can call on. Which sounds terrible to a certain perspective, because it means you're limiting some officers' career literally because they're your insurance. But that fleet is going to be a fleet of not great dashing heroes, but of solid commanders. Solid commanders. Who maybe don't do the dashing thing, but aren't going to make any unforced errors. And ergo are going to be very reliable if, oh, we've lost the Mediterranean fleet, and they're heading up to the Channel fleet, and we need to rapidly arm up a fleet. Well, if we call this bunch of captains in, they're going to be capable of wielding a force around them. It's pragmatic. Very correct, Tanith. Examiner, there is nothing more frustrating than watching people attempt donuts and failing them miserably. So, you know, that's what he's doing at this time. And now when you have Augustus Keppel get command of a fleet, well... yeah... The thing is, Keppel had been leading the van at the Battle of Quiberon Bay. And it was at the first Battle of Ushant, which comes in 1778, that Rowley would also lead. Because when we're talking about the Battle of Ushant, which is an indecisive battle, which has all sorts of issues going on with it, guess who the captain is that Keppel puts at the front of his fleet? In the 74-gun Monarch is Captain Joshua Rowley. I've told you before, I've talked about how being not just in the van, but being the ship at the front of the fleet has an importance. How their decisions can cause issues with the rest of the fleet. How their options can cause problems. You want a reliable captain at the front of the fleet. And the thing is, Monarch does what it's supposed to. It's Hugh Palliser in charge of the Rearward Division which really doesn't do what it's supposed to. The van, under Sir Robert Harland, with Captain Joshua Bowley right at the front, they do what they're supposed to do. When the British van passes the end of the French line, as is sort of pictured here, Harland gives the order for his ships to come about so as to chase the French rearguard. And while they're doing this, Pallas's force had still not even formed line of battle. That's why Palliser ends up getting badly mauled by the French van. And why there are all sorts of issues. But Harland, the van, and Rowley, if any section of the fleet actually acquits themselves with anything glorious in this battle, in the Battle of Ushant, which I've talked about before in the Keppel Palliser affair, it was Rowley and the van. It was. And if it hadn't been for the party politics which took over the battle, I have no doubt that Harland, the rear admiral in charge of the van, and Rowley, the captain at the front of the van, who both did an absolutely spectacular job, would have been awarded far higher medals than what happened. But they weren't. Again, reliable officer. Chosen for a very interesting position. Oh, I should not look at chat. I should not look at chat. I need to look away. Okay. Now, at the Battle of Grenada, Rowley is, by this point, Commodore Rowley? Rear Admiral Rowley? And he's starting to get command. And again, he's the reliable positions. He'd gone out with 7 ships to be as a Commodore to reinforce John Byrom in sort of the Caribbean, and reinforce the British forces in what's called as the West Indies at the point. In West Indies, yes, at the point. And 19th of March, 1779, and a very important day, he's promoted the Rear Admiral to Blue. And he does something different. The Battle of Grenada is a French victory, right? But again, the van acquits itself well. It really does. The battle, which we often discuss, is D'Estaing is the French commander, and when he spots the British, he forms a line of battle. But the thing is, he forms a line of battle in order of speed, which sort of hides his true strength. which meant Byron thought that he could give General chase and break up the line. He then attempts to reform the line when he realises the reality of it. The section which manages to reform most capably is the van. Now, the van is technically under the command of Vice-Admiral Sir Samuel Barrington in HMS Prince of Wales, a 74-gun ship of the line. But the thing is, the van includes, at the right at its front, theoretically, the Suffolk, with Rear Admiral Joshua Rowley and aboard. So literally, the van has both a Vice Admiral and a Rear Admiral in, and pretty much they've got the Suffolk, Boyne, Royal Oak, Prince of Wales, Magnificent, Trident, Medway. And it's kind of interesting when you start looking at the van as a formation. They seem to have been A, the ones who got into the fight far harder, and B, the ones who were organised far better. The ones who seem to have got into the issue were the ones of the centre force which get into the fight. Now, the French had come out of battle with superior strength. They hadn't managed to. The results, realistically, are 25 ships of the line versus 21 ships of the line. And whilst the French win, the British don't lose any ships. And the French don't either. And it's kind of a case of, the French won. Why? Well, they only had 173 killed to the 183 killed of the British. Okay. And what else? Well, the French had 773 wounded, and the British had 346 wounded. But the French returned to Grenada to rearm afterwards, whereas the British had to return to their own base in St. Kitts. So I go, well, that kind of makes sense. Technically, you can argue the French won because the British withdrew in the face of the French strength. But it's also one of those scenarios where you sit there and go, not sure it really works out that way. And what we can start to see is Rowley's a bit annoyed with this. Think about it. Rowley has been under some pretty good commanders. He's seen his own father in command of a fleet. His own father work through various options. And now he's had an admiral who's honestly done a stupid thing. Because if you're not sure of the enemy's strength, and your intelligence is never that accurate in this period, you don't break formation. And the thing is, if the British line had turned up in proper formation, and the French line had been in as disorganised a formation as it was, where the ships were in order of speed, rather than in terms of firepower or duty, or as they should be sensibly organised, in terms of fleet formation, squadron, then theoretically, despite their lack of numbers, if they'd been properly formed up, they could have won that fight. If they'd been kept as a solid mass to hit the French hard, they could have won that fight. If you'd been able to double line it, detach the van or the rear to go out the other side of the French, all sorts of options you could have done. But Byron didn't do that. Byron saw the French coming out, presumed they were weaker than him from what limited information he could see, and ordered a general chase, and an enemy fleet coming out of port of undeterminate strength. Next battle is different. Next battle is the Battle of Guadeloupe in 1779. And this battle is really not discussed a lot. And it should be. Because it's a British victory. And it's 4 ships of the line versus 3 frigates. And the 3 frigates all get captured. Basically, Rowley is cruising. He is wandering through the Caribbean. He's technically wandering around Guadeloupe, keeping it under sort of loose blockade. And he has a force of HMS Magnificent. Always a nice ship to have. A capable 74 gun. HMS Suffolk and HMS Vengeance, also 74 gun ships. And HMS Stirling Castle, a 64 gun ship. So, 4 third rates. He has nice vessels, good captains, and he's on his own. And he sights a 32-gun frigate, a French frigate, the Fortune, and the Blanche. And then spots also the 28-gun Elise. And they have been part of the Comte d'Estaing's fleet, the Count d'Estaing's fleet. They've been part of that fleet, which they lost, they had that indecisive battle with. And, well, how do I put this politely? Somehow he managed to surprise them. He's literally sailing up on them in 4 ships a line, and they don't realise he's coming. There are arguments that they were in disorder, they were weak. But either way, it turns out he can outspeed them. And the Blanche is defeated and captured on the 21st of December. Fortune tried to escape by throwing her guns overboard, but captured on the 22nd of December. And the Elise, well, she strikes her colours an hour later. The Blanche and Fortune were added to the Royal Navy. The thing is, with these frigates out the way and captured, he then managed to capture a French convoy, which had sailed from Marseille, which was off Martinique. He has a lovely time. Honestly, let me put it this way: if you're a Royal Navy Rear Admiral, and you're going, so I captured 3 frigates, 2 were brought into the Royal Navy, and then I captured a whole convoy. And yes, this is his first independent command as a Rear Admiral. You know, this is absolute. This is an admiral going, woohoo! I paid for my kids' careers. All my daughters are getting good dowries. Everything's gonna be good. Was there a difference in prize money between frigates sent by the Royal Navy and ships sent to the breakers? The ships wouldn't necessarily be sent to be the breakers. They could be sold to be merchant ships, and I think that's what happens to the Elise. I think she's sold to be a merchant ship and is bought by a merchant trader. So the thing is, the ships could be sent to breakers. They could be broken up for parts. But no, you'd get prize money as to the value of the ship being purchased into the Navy, or you get prize money of it being sold off, or it being sold off. Either way, you're getting money. And yeah, he's getting the Admiral's share. And then he gets the Admiral's share of a very large convoy. Yeah. As an admiral, he's made a lot of money. He didn't manage to capture an admiral ship, but he managed to capture these ships from... And also, it kind of... How to put it? It adds a bit more luster to Rowley, which wasn't really needed at this point. But more importantly, it allows it's a case of the people looking at him going, well, he fought well in the van, and oh, when he's on his independent command, he can be trusted. Yes. There are options for the finances. There's a lot of money he will earn in that. He will have earned from that. And then comes along his next thing, and his next big command is going to be under Rodney. Rodney arrives from England to command a station. And this leads to the Battle of Martinique. Now, Rodney, as I've talked about before, is an interesting officer. One of the interesting things it's noted is that Rodney trusts Rowley. And they fight battles against Degushan. And they're indecisive. And Rowley is sent to Jamaica to reinforce Peter Parker's fleet with 10 ships of the line. Because the Spanish were threatening the Jamaica colony. And it's quite literally, it's a case of, I need to send a reinforcement force which is going to hold, and I need to send a good officer with them. Now, Rodney, yeah, he gets a battleship named after him, and I've done a video about him. He is one of Britain's best admirals. Well, the point of tonight's video, and I'll make this even more clear when I do the long patrol, which will come out in probably a couple of weeks' time, is that there are a lot of these admirals going around, and the thing is, what you hear about the big towers of the wooden wall, the towering figures, but the bulwarks of it, the ones who make it work day to day, the ones who are doing these sort of operations, these sort of battles, you don't hear about. They don't come through history. Nicholas Rogers is a very good book. This is Command of the Ocean. And if you look up at the end for all the different officers in here, you go to the R section, and you look up for Rowley. And I can tell you where William Rowley is. I can tell you where Commodore Josias is. And Rowley. Joshua Rowley, not there. So this is probably one of the best books of this period covering it. And Rowley's just not there. There are notes where his ship is mentioned. The Montague and the various other things where they get involved. But Rowley himself doesn't feature in the index. We are talking about Rowley. But he serves under Rodney. And Rodney's a good officer for him to serve under. He is, basically, Rodney's very happy to get someone like Rowley under his command. Let's be honest, if you are an admiral who wants to do dashing things, who does these great operations, you want some solid commanders underneath you, who you can rely on, who if you give an order, will come hell or high water, excuse the French, do that instruction, do that order. If you order Rowley to take the van in, he will find a way to take the van in until the van is in. If you order him to take the rear, he will protect the rear. Your fleet, there will be no point at which the enemy will turn your rear. No point will they double up your line from the rear while Rowley's there. He won't do anything too massively adventurous, but by gum, they won't crush him either. And that's the thing. When Rodney's doing trying to do the things he does, especially in the Battle of Martinique, and the operations against the Comte de Guichen, when they have these indecisive fights, if you look consistently, the officer in charge of the rear is Joshua Rowley. HMS Conqueror. Rear Admiral Joshua Rowley in charge. So in these fights, which could quite easily go either way, because Guichen is not a bad commander by any stretch. And I agree, there were these various battles are advantages lost. There are 3 indecisive battles which are against de Guichen, and it's one of those things of frigate. It happens, but the point is, Rodney always feels sure he can do what he wants to do, can achieve what he needs to achieve, because he's got Rowley in his stern. And I've talked about when I talked about Rodney and I talked about a man on Martinique. Remember, I brought up the example of Captain Robert Clarke, who was in charge of HMS Sterling, who misunderstood the signals from Rodney, or forgotten them, or actively misunderstood them, and managed to muck up Rodney's plan of breaking the line. He never had any problems with the stern. And when Rodney his HMS Sandwich passes through the lines, when his own ship passes through the line, it's the rear which comes up to support him. It's the rear which is under Rowley that comes up to support Rodney. That does its duty. I'm sure Thomas Collingwood would as well, but, we'll leave that to one side. Hyde Parker was also not happy with Clarke. There's an interesting thing is that Robert Clarke, how do I put this, doesn't have a good career afterwards. And Clarke is, how do I put it this way? He is ordered to go with Rowley. When Rowley takes ships off to Jamaica, Clarke goes under his command. And the idea was probably to send him home there, and he was sent home, but the Sterling castle is actually lost at sea. And so they don't get to do a further reprimand of Robert Clarke, but, It's Rowley who was the backup. Rowley did his duty, basically. Again, in that fleet action, if you are planning on breaking the French line, again, think about it from this point of view. If you are breaking the French line, and your plan is for your van to try and pierce a hole, and then your centre to come through and widen that hole, well, the enemy's going to be enemy van is going to try and stop that, and so's their rear, possibly going to try and close that up. It's your rear which is going to have to fight the action to hold that gap open, while your own fleet reforms and fights after you've broken the line. So whatever you have to do is your rear in that fight cannot break. You have to have it under the command of someone you trust will to be fired at, will be stormed at, will be blasted at, will be blown at, and will not break. Will keep his fleet together. That's Rowley. Now, it's after this battle, and it's after various operations where he's going to enforce it, that in 1782, he is sent to take command of the Jamaica station. And he holds that until the end of the American War of Independence. There isn't much action there. He managed to try and bring peace to the Kingdom of Haiti. He's honoured with a baronetcy, and he's made a Vice-Admiral of the White in 1787. But he has no further sea time after he comes home. He returns to the UK in 1783. Yeah, it's still going. And so, yeah, he does well. But we are talking about a man who you won't hear about. He does a lot of leadership, and ex-submariner who will probably testify to this. There are a lot of officers you will never hear about who are absolutely essential to the operations of larger fleets. You will never hear about them. They will never be sung the praises of. They will never be mentioned in the papers. No matter what they do. Because they are the good, reliable officers. They're not the dashing heroes. At no point... He captures ships, but he doesn't do it by jumping from one ship to another ship and capturing 2 ships in a go. He does it by surrounding them with 3 other ships and going, "Do you want to make this a fight? You really want to fight me? I've got 3-1 odds, you're cornered. You really want to fight me? You don't? Good." That doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a good officer. It makes you a fine officer. A good captain. But it doesn't make you a hero. 3-1 odds, they keep your people alive. They don't make the papers write this glorious victory. But you have your choice. Would he have been a hero in the right situation? Probably. If he had to fight if Battle of Martinique had turned into a massive battle, then yes, he could well have been a hero, although Rodney would have outshone him because Rodney would have been in command. But the thing is, he would have been a hero for holding the line open and given a glorious write-up for it. But the thing is, that's where he'd get his type officer would get the chance to be a hero. Good man in a storm, yes. So, with that being said, we're on to the question time, and okay, we're here about 15 minutes earlier than I thought I would be, but, you know, plenty of time for questions then. Hello, Big Fluff. I have a big fluffy poodle next to me. I did probably rush the shameless book plug section a bit. Smart enough not to need to be a hero. That's a great line. I think I'll nick that one. I'll nick that one down, Freeman. Smart enough to not need to be a hero. Knight 6831. If the Royal Navy had named ships after all the admirals they ever had who deserved one, they'd still be naming them after them. The Royal Navy has a lot of admirals. This is one of the things of this period. There is a lot of admirals. And the fact he gets to be a Vice-Admiral of the White, and if we consider it, he gets to be a Vice-Admiral of the White, and his son is an Admiral of the White. And yeah. Sir William Rowley is an Admiral of the White, who's his son. Dies. Yeah. His father was an Admiral of the White, I mean. His son was Joshua was a Vice-Admiral of the White. And I think, let's see, what was it? His son, I think Sir Charles Rowley, sure he was an Admiral of the White as well, wasn't he? Possibly. I think he was. He was Commander-in-Chief Nor, Commander-in-Chief Jamaica Station, 3rd Naval Lord. Oh no, Charles Rowley, of course, comes afterwards. By the time he becomes an admiral, they no longer have admirals of the white. Dang, that's why he doesn't get it. Sorry, that's on me. He does, but he is one of the first 3rd Naval Lords. Control the naval and control navy. Well, I've done. I'm sure I've mentioned before. I'm sure I've done something about Charles Rowley. What was the longest running Admiral dynasty in the Royal Navy? They're still going. They're still going. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're still going. And I think it could be the where there is one which has multiple branches. I think it could be the Somerville Hood family, but I'm not 100% sure from. But from memory, yeah, I think it could be the Somerville Hoods. And I think there currently is one of their family in it, but I'm not 100% sure because of course sometimes they are married in and things. And that dynasty, it's still counting, that's the thing. How's the computer issue going? New computer stuff has arrived to be built. Does Rodney need to put a retreat? He always needs to put a retreat. When Rome controlled the entire Mediterranean, how was there still piracy in the Med? Did they not control the ports? Oh, they did. But some of the pirates... Remember, the ships were ships that you could pull up on a beach. So if you have a secluded inlet, you can carry out piracy. But the thing is, you didn't often... When Rome controlled the Mediterranean at the height of the Roman naval strength, when they had fine fleets to control the Mediterranean, you didn't do it for long. Those fleets would soon deal with you. Basically, what piracy was at certain points was what... How about this? My family were merchant sailors. We were just heavily armed merchant sailors who would sometimes not visit another port and come back with goods. Okay? Oh, you're not pirates. No, we were not pirates. At no point were we ever caught and convicted of piracy. And many times we were hired to go and chase down the pirates who'd been plaguing an area. And sometimes we'd even catch them. But we were not the pirates. So again, that's a sort of issue you have to understand at some points. That's right. Admiral Stradivarius says being a great seaman means not requiring great machinemanship. Yeah. There is that whole thing of, if you're very good at your job, you tend to try and make your job easy and sensible, and not find yourself in a situation where you are, oh, good lord, what the frigate's going on? I am surrounded. This is not good. This is not good. Actually, he is, as of today, allowed treats, but he's still supposed to be building himself up. He's a good boy. The vets were happy with him today. Take care, Tanif. Michael Kirch, who would be Rowley Zagun in other periods in World War One, World War Two? Take a look at half the admirals in charge of battle squadrons. Most of the battle squadron admirals, most of the admirals in charge of cruiser squadrons during World War One, especially Battle of Jutland, they're usually solid commanders, solid admirals. They won't lose a battle. They might not win it gloriously, but they won't lose it either. They'll give you a solid win. It won't be a Trafalgar, but it will be a win. How are the computer issues going? I think I answered that earlier, but if I haven't, the parts arrived, so yes, it's new computer. And have you noticed the laptop speed's slightly better? It's got more RAM in it. It's suddenly got 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's happy. It's gone up from 8, of which only 4 was actually working, to 16, which is all working, and this is a good thing. So it should be ready by brew ships. Yes, because as long as the... I will do a video probably tomorrow of me, if it arrives tomorrow, of me assembling it all for you. I'll do it live on Twitch or something. Assembling computer. I don't know, which type of ship in the Royal Navy has the most ships named after captains? Honestly, the Royal Navy barely names enough ships after admirals, let alone captains. Honestly, the Royal Navy doesn't usually like to name it after people unless they think it's really worthwhile. And when it's worthwhile, it's a big admiral. And the reason you have ships which are named like sort of Rodney, Nelson, even took an Anson and Howe, and Hood, is because those names carry with them a certain level of fear, a certain level of cachet, especially in the period where everyone's reading naval history, especially naval personnel. But also, you have to remember they're coming through in a period where people are reading Mahan, Corbett, and it's fashionable for politicians to read them as well as admirals and naval officers. So they read them, and they read the histories of them, and therefore the names inspire something in them. The Royal Navy's shameless about their psychology, their approach to psychology in the enemy. They literally do pick names which are going to have an impact on their psychology. And if you think admirals are going to work, admirals are going to work. It's rare that they pick captains. You know, Duncan's an admiral. Trying to think of any captains who get ships named after them. It's very, very rare. I don't think there's really there's nothing. There have been some, but I wouldn't say I wouldn't say which force had the most ships named after captains because they're so few. They really are. Ex-Aaron, if there were no American independence in 1776, what are your thoughts on how history would have been shaped? It's going to depend on how wars start to break out. I think eventually you do have an American independence. But the thing is, if you have... basically if Spain replaces France as being a source of tension, and so the Americans feel that paying for the British defence is justified versus the cost. Paying the taxes is justified for the peace it brings versus the Spanish. Then it could carry on, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Americans end up being the first Dominion, i.e. the first independent state, and expanding. How it works out, how things expand across, whether you end up with North America being multiple nations, or whether you end up with a sort of greater Canada made up of the 13 colonies plus whatever area they've expanded to in Canada, I don't know. It's honestly too complicated for me to say in answer to the question. I could do a long patrol and try and figure out, but I'm a naval historian, not a economic, social, cultural historian, and whilst I have to cover those parts to understand how navies felt and work them in, because it is part of it, I would say that's such a massive question. It would be me, Drac, and 2 rather large bottles of iron brew conversation to work it out. Probably with Jamie Seedal and probably Sal Merculago there as well to argue with and try and figure it out. Black Horse, were there cases of state-sponsored pirates? Look up privateers. That literally is what they are. Privateers, by their very nature, are state-sponsored pirates. Hold on, did you command the actual pirates or just some helpless opponents? My family wouldn't, in the nicest way. You suggesting my family would use their position to just take out the competition? That's terrible! You besmirch us, sir. The fact that you think we'd allow competition in the first place worries me. Yeah, Captain class frigates, potentially. But if we consider those frigates and we consider their purposes and their ranks and, you know, what those ships were, you start looking at them and you go, okay. They're mostly named for quite senior officers. And yeah. There's not many of them as well either. There's really not a lot of them. There's 78, I suppose, so they're probably about... Oh, when you're looking through that list... Those officers, this is the trouble. Every time I look at the captain list of officers, I'm just looking and going... Yeah, let's see. Captain, HMS Affleck. Name for Rear Admiral Sir Edmund Affleck. Rowley does get his ship there. Rowley gets one. But I think in some ways the fact is that, you know... I think there's only ever been one ship named Rowley. So probably it is the captain class, because they're about the only options which are all named after naval officers, but they're mostly named after admirals. And I do love the fact that the thing they list for him is Rowley was the commanding officer of HMS Montague during the Battle of Quiberon Bay. Not the battle of the battles he won, not the battle he did himself. No, Quiberon Bay. Hawke was in charge. I don't think the captain class really... Nice way, if you consider what the captain class get up to, they're escort frigates. They're not really going to be given any more attention. Yeah, so in a nice way, they don't really get any attention. Well, so pirates versus privateers is like spies versus agents, or officers. Pirates and spies are bad people. We are the good people. Yeah! Yeah. Killed one U-boat, yeah. It was, in nicest way, Rowley would not have been disappointed. The thing is, Rowley wouldn't have cared that he didn't get a cruiser or a destroyer or something dashing. He got something useful and practical, and let's be honest, he commanded a frigate himself, so he'd probably appreciate the irony of having a frigate named after him. But, again, it's a stalwart vessel which does its job as an escort. That's it. It doesn't do it for dash or honor. And this is the thing. A lot of these officers, we are used to the idea of naval officers as glory hounds, because mostly we hear about the ones who do go for glory, who do get the heights of glory. And thinking about Rowley, he wins a frigating battle, and still, when people talk about him, they talk about Quiberon Bay, where he was a captain. The man commands and wins the battle himself. Basically dominates the French in the Caribbean from the Jamaica station. Does all sorts of jobs in the American War of Independence and the 7 Years' War. And what's he remembered for? He was a captain at Quiberon Bay. It's kind of like a case of, oh, yeah. It's like when you talk to some people and they go, oh, you're writing the first line of your obituary. Or there's always the common joke, which which you can have of who's going to be mentioned if this building suddenly goes flat. Who's going to be the first line in the write-up in the newspaper tomorrow? So, any more questions? Or what I'll do is I'll end the video, and then I will go check on everyone, put someone to his bed, and then pop in on Discord. I might also order a McDonald's, because I'm hungry. And my dinner was eaten by a corgi. My dinner was eaten by a corgi. It was lovely. Basically, in a whole load of chicken and nicely sort of pulled chicken and pulled pork, not with sauce on it, had been brought home beautifully. It had been left over from the lunch, and they'd brought it home and put it there on the side for me. And someone managed to hop up on a chair, onto a chair, managed to hop up onto the side, walk the entire way round the side, eat my entire dinner, and then hop down, and a few minutes later, puked. Corgis. I think it is better than obscurity, but I think I am starting to think the Royal Navy does need an Admiral class again, but they'll go for the great Admirals, because in a nice way that's going to be the state of ships. There is a reason why there's an Admiral Duncan in the Type 45s. It's also a good way to make a nod to the Scots, like HMS Dragon is a nod to the Welsh. Yes, Night Super, I do know what happened on Monday with the Super Hornet being lost overboard to the sea. But as I've said before many times, one of the longest running threats, and one of the reasons why the Royal Navy preferred internal centerline deck lifts and things and have an internal hangar for a long period, was because the sea likes to nick aircraft. But we'll talk about that and on brew ships on Sunday. Yeah, there's all sorts of discussions about what was actually happening to the ship. So thank you very much, everyone. What have we got coming up? Well, you should have seen some of the videos have already been raised for next month. May is kind of Jellic is kind of a Jutland and Tashima month. There is a reason why 6th of May is John Jellicoe, Legend of Jutland. Then Admiral Shear is the 13th of May. Then the 20th of May is the Battle of Tashima, Logistics, Learning and Application. And the Battle of Jutland, Strategy of Leadership is the 27th of May. So Jutland is kind of... Jutland and Tashima are kind of big things this month. Hence me also pointing out this massive book. It is truly big. It's also a good book, but it is. And this is one of the reasons why I've got this out of the stores. It's funny to think I do still have stores of books. We are getting more, don't we? There are more books coming. I know this scares you slightly, Rowley. I know you believe that someday you're going to wake up surrounded by books and not be able to get out. But I'm sure you'll always be able to get out. So thank you, Steve Clarke, Paul Amos, Calvin Gasberg, Jonathan Moon, Michael Cooch, 9681, Leslie, Arunon, Medi, 9681, Exar Mariner, Mark Hartness, all the people on Twitch, Seneca Nero, all the people on Twitch and on YouTube, Black Horse, Brock, thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it. Dan Freeman, Drakenred, Dave Harrison, Medi, I'm not sure if I said that again, HMS Ford, all of you, thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting away. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting the channel by being here. That's one of the things. I do know the ads can get annoying, but if you don't have the ads turned on for every 30 minutes, it gets annoying with you. Unless you're over a certain subscriber count, it seems to me. If you are, you can do a live and still get good return if you are over something like 50,000 subscribers. And I'm a little over 15,000, so I'm a long way from that. And when I say good return, I mean a good return from the logarithm. It's not in terms of money, it's in terms of the logarithm. If I turn off... I did a live not too long ago, you won't find it now because I added in ads afterwards, where I didn't have the ads turned on. And at one point I was streaming to about 10 people on YouTube and on Twitch. And the thing is, that's about normal for Twitch. For YouTube, it's normally 60 to 70 on a live. So that's the difference not with the logarithm of not having the ads turned on, it seems. We'll see. Anyway, thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you, Sending Penguins. Thank you, everyone. And as I said, I'm probably off to order a McDonald's. And then be on Discord and chat away with you all. Take care.